Rwanda joins Benin, Gambia and Seychelles to declare visa-free entry for all Africans as Kenya set to eliminate visa requirements. Also on the program, International Conservation Group rescues 2,000 South African rhinos. This is Africa Update on Trust TV, reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Ayuba Ilyas. Rwanda is the latest African country to declare visa-free entry for all Africans following Benin Republic, Gambia and Seychelles. President Paul Kagame made the announcement in Rwandan capital Kigali, where he pitched the potential of Africa as a unified tourism destination for a continent that still relies on 60% of its tourists from outside Africa, according to data from the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. President of Rwanda, Kenya, William Ruto, also recently announced that Kenya's border will be open to visitors from entirety of Africa with no visas required by the end of 2023. Aiming to boost trade and travel within the continent, President Ruto cited the removal of barriers as essential for implementing the African Continental Free Trade Area. The move is expected to address the historical challenges posed by costly and time-consuming visa processes and high airfares, which have hindered intra-African travel for passport holders from 32 out of 54 African countries. Despite the slow pace of change in African countries due to concerns about crime and security, the 2022 Africa Visa Openness Report indicates a positive trend. Most nations are simplifying entry procedures, with the majority now allowing visa-free travel to at least 5 other African countries and promoting increased freedom of movement within regional blocs. Additionally, the number of countries offering e-visas has more than doubled since 2016, reflecting a growing commitment to facilitating intra-African travel. Now, to further discuss this, we have joining us virtually from Kenya, George Abwajo, a public finance and policy analyst from Kenya. Thank you so much for joining us on Africa Update, George.
Greetings to all our African viewership from Kenya.
All right. Well, let's start with the reactions in Kenya. How are Kenyans reacting to this announcement by your President William Ruto, to the fact that the country is working towards eliminating all visa requirements by the end of the year?
I think the last 3 months, basically in Kenya, it's been a very tough period economically, that is. And amidst the challenges that has been going on, our president has been on shuttle diplomacy, possibly going to appear as a spokesman for Africa, that is. And so this announcement to us as a regional powerhouse, other neighbors like Tanzania or Uganda haven't always taken kind of Kenyans trading. I mean, Kenyans have been welcoming to all the East African countries. And so the announcement of visa, there are other people who are feeling or have a feeling that the president possibly should focus more on home affairs. There are others who are optimistic on what the opportunities that can bring, especially now that the African Free Continental Trade Area has is being implemented. Kenyans are known to be robust and robust traders, highly skilled individuals. And so for the elite or for the well-schooled, this has a feeling of more opportunities for the majority of the young people who feel that the country cannot absorb them. And with the high unemployment internally, they are more so celebrating the opportunities that this may bring to them.
What does the Kenyan government seek to achieve with this policy? What are the areas, if any, that have been highlighted?
One is, I have a feeling that, one, like I said, our population is a bit skilled. This announcement comes after several announcements internally that the government is working with other countries, especially in the Middle East, to absorb skilled Kenyans in various areas. So I think this is a policy that the government has, so that other young Kenyans who may not get opportunities, because Kenyans are known to be innovative, who may not get opportunities internally, they can benefit from the opportunities that can be available in other African countries. We are a known agricultural powerhouse. We are a known fintech powerhouse, Africa. And I think going and expanding opportunities for other Africans to take up the opportunities that are available in other African countries opens the trade opportunities for the people who are here. So even before the announcement of free visas that would bring others people and enable African, also Kenyan, the individuals, Kenyan residents to trade, there is an opportunity, or there has been an announcement that Kenya seeks to export its labor outside the Africa or outside the region.
How would you describe Kenya's relationship in business-wise with other African countries at the moment?
I think if you look at the East, look at the East and the Eastern Africa region, we have a very good relationship. One, we are a beacon of peace in our region, per se. And like I said, we have welcomed all Eastern African countries. Within the Eastern Africa, there is free flow movement. There may be one or two countries like Tanzania that have an issues with the work permits that welcome Kenya. But we have a free flow. I mean, if you look at the trade partner, Kenya's biggest trade partner has been Uganda for the longest time. There's a huge agricultural import that comes from Tanzania. But if you even look at the other trade, COMESA, we are part of COMESA, and we import huge duty-free sugar from Malawi and Zambia. So there is a thriving and more opportunity-laden relationship that Kenya has developed with the region. Not so much happens with West Africa, and I think therefore lies in a low-hanging fruit on what the inter-African trade can help us.
Are there concerns? We all know how terrorism is spreading across the continent, and are there security concerns, attached to this policy? When you open the borders and allow everyone to come in without visas, what are the likely implications security-wise?
There has been discussion by the policymakers that it should not be a fair tool, that even amidst the visa that we are seeking, we should kind of try and vet that the African Union shall have an African-wide association as a host organization to kind of see the way the EU is, if one is blacklisted, and it would mean having Interpol close by, so that, yes, we are welcoming any every African country to come and trade. And I mean, I think it should be well understood that this visa-free is not for joyriders. You should migrate from one country to the other country. If it is not for tourism or trade, you should not go to the other African countries. So in as much as there is visa-free, we should encourage those people who are going to do something meaningful. If it's not for tourism, let it be for trade, but not to idle. So that's the spirit that we do think that should be employed in visa-free, so that we do not have people who do not, if they do not give a reason to go to another country, they should not go there. So they should still be restricted. But if it is coming for tourism or trade, that visa-free makes it easier movement in terms of goods and in terms of the personnel that moves.
Okay. What are the limitations that you see in this whole process? Because it's one thing to allow for visa-free entry, is another for people to be able to reside in the host country peacefully and be able to do business. So we've had instances where foreign nationals are being attacked, you know, in some countries. I mean, we know about the xenophobic attacks in South Africa. We know about, you know, the seeming tension between Nigerians and Ghanaians, for instance, you know, due to some of these things. So are there likely limitations aside granting visa? What other arrangements need to be put in place for people to actually freely move in and do business comfortably?
I think at the initial phase, some nationals within other African countries will kind of feel that other residents or other nationals from other countries will be taking their jobs. So one sensitization needs to happen to the natives of the host countries, because like we've seen in Southern African countries, if it's not well employed, you will find that, and if the other countries do not welcome people who come from other regions, what the obvious repercussions would be, if sensitization does not happen, that attacks, I mean, the environment for trade will not be favorable to anyone who comes. So one limitation is there has to be enough sensitization to the public or to the natives that this will increase jobs, and the people who are coming, there should be sensitization that the people who are coming, whether they are tourists, they're coming to spend money, and if they are businessmen, they are coming, they're bringing capitalization to that country. So the one limitation, like you said, security, people who are coming to not well-known reason, for coming to spy or attack. Two would be attacks by the locals who may feel opportunities. I know of a company that, a Kenyan company that has set up in a neighboring company. But currently, the government has only allowed the top manager to be there and forced that company to have all the other positions be the natives. It is whether there is lack of skilled personnel or not, they have forced that company that they should employ the natives from that area. So those are the limitations that may arise from that. Another limitation would be, yes, there may be visa-free, but what is the cost of work permits? You know, you have allowed me to go to your country, but the work permit is very prohibitive. 2 days ago, Kenyans increased work permit from about 200,000 to 1 million Kenya shillings. So yes, you may come, but we still have small internal issues, like the cost of work permit for you to set up a business, the tax issues that may be there in the country.
Again, so those are some of the issues that some people have raised, saying that yes, we've seen this pronouncement about visa-free entry, but then with the other hand, the government is now introducing certain policies that will increase, you know, things like taxes and other costs, you know, that eventually will probably defeat the whole idea of, you know, having a visa-free entry.
And I would also add that, yes, you want to do visa-free. What really makes the environment easier for people to travel? Even without the visa, I would come to Nigeria if the rates for transport or the air transport cost is easy for me. And so there are those complementary framework agreements that if we don't ease in, it will count for nothing. Because people feel first, the inter-African trade is hampered by lack of ease in terms of transport. I mean, if I want to go to Benin, I have to go to Europe or Dubai. There are very few direct flights. So before we really make a journey, before we really make visa-free, how is the cost of access that we are going to take opportunity? I would like to go to Eastern DRC, but the DRC itself, connecting East and West is a problem. And that's within one country.
Okay.
And so that negates everything else.
All right. Well, we've had President Paul Kagame of Rwanda also talks about how this will help to boost tourism intra-Africa, tourism from within Africa. We know that our people love to travel for vacations in Europe and so on. Meanwhile, we have so many tourist sites right here on the continent. So in respect to that, how do you see this boosting tourism in Kenya, for instance, and what does it cost really for someone who is watching us right now? What would it cost for someone to travel to Kenya and have a good time, you know, perhaps for a week or so? How are the other, you know, hospitality aspects of this, you know, whole conversation going to be?
The truth is, there's a lot of pressure, especially on this. I mean, if it's for tourism, we've been getting 1.2 million tourists a year. And you compare it with Morocco, that has been getting almost 5-6 million tourists a year. But look at the people going to Morocco. That number, or even South Africa, that number is not, majority is not from Africa. You've got very many Europeans and people from Asia going to Morocco, so and Egypt. So the people pushing this number, they are not Africans. It means there's something prohibiting Africans from traveling. Like I said, the visa cost possibly would be something between $200 to $300 to access Kenya, or the visa cost, if at all there was a visa cost. But if you factor in the cost of transportation, you may see that it offsets the visa cost. That's why it is easier for someone from Europe, coming from Spain or Portugal or Germany, to access Morocco than it is easier for someone from Uganda or Malawi or Zambia. So because of the prohibitive air transport. So the air transport cost is even greater than the visa cost. So there are complementary facilities that we need to build up.
Does this have to do?
Many of these things need to be able to travel.
Does this have to do with the exchange
Kenya, for
rates?
example,
does this have to do with the exchange rates when you talk about the transport fares, for instance? Is it about the exchange rates?
Partly it has to do with the exchange rates, but what I'm saying, we still have prohibitive air transport, various licenses to cross the border. I mean, an example of Kenya, to fly from Nairobi to Kampala eastwards and going to Goma, there are cities that we pass. If we take an example of Kenya, like Andriod or Kisumu. But if there is no direct flight from Kisumu to Kampala, which is easier or shorter than Nairobi to Kampala. So that one means if you want to go to Kampala from Kisumu, you have to fly to Nairobi, then you go again a longer route to Kampala. So there are small hindrances that may not favor traveling, tourism travel. In truth, the normal African really wants to travel and explore other African countries. The cost, I think, is not, for someone who's possibly well-traveled like myself, the cost is not very prohibitive. I mean, the cost of the hotels, that is, when within the cost of parks, to access parks, it is well affordable for an African middle class to travel. But like I said, what is the access, or how is the access in going to other African countries?
All right. So how much of a barrier do you think is the issue of language, for instance? On the continent, we know that there are francophones and, you know, there are anglophones countries across the continent. So the continent is divided between French-speaking and English-speaking and so on. How much of a barrier is that, and how can we bridge that?
Oh, that's the language barrier is which cause. I mean, if you study how people travel in Africa, you'll find that Francophone countries, majority of the people from that country tend to visit the countries that, yes, fellow Francophone countries. And the other Anglophone countries like Kenya, you'll again find that people are easier traveling. But if you actually travel, you are not going to find a challenge, especially in accessing and enjoying yourself. Whether you go to Angola where people speak Portuguese, or you go to the Francophone part of Cameroon, If you are a tourist or if you're a business, I think this one has been well proved for those who travel on conferences. And we find it easier even navigating the Francophone countries when I come from an Anglophone country like Kenya. And there's help, whether from the hotel. That has not been an interest for business or conference travel as myself that much, because you are going to find one or two people, the taxi person and the translator in the hotel, to at least draw for you a route and go there. I mean, go to the place where you want to go, whether to visit a park. So yes, it's a challenge, but if you mean to travel, whether it's a business or tourism, it may, you are going to really access.
Okay. Now, I believe that all of this, it's part of, the effort to fulfill the agenda, AU Agenda 2063, as part of the attempt to integrate the continent further. Yeah. With this pace that we are seeing, we are talking about only 27% of African countries where you have this kind of arrangements where people can actually travel visa-free. How do you think that we can achieve this Agenda 2063? Is it achievable with the pace that we have right now?
I think if you first look at the flagship projects that if you look at Agenda 2063, the first 10 years, the flagship project for the first 10 years, that is implementation of the African commodity strategy, that we have to get our commodities market well, that's anchoring on trade. There are about 5 flagship areas that this visa requirement will help us. I mean, the creation of African continental trade area, for it to be well achieved, the visa, again, the visa-free initiative will going to help. There is the African passport and free movement of people. Agenda 23 envisions a passport, whether it's a digital passport, that would recognize you as an African. In East Africa, we currently have the East African passport. If you get that passport, you can access anywhere in East Africa easily with an ID. And lastly, the single African air transport market. It's envisioned that by 2063, we should have a seamless air transport network that would really help air transport companies move easily from one place without any hindrance.
All right.
Like, it's a borderless Moscow of a borderless country. So all these flagship projects hinge on the visa-free requirement.
All right.
And yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much, George Abuja, public finance and policy analyst from Kenya. Thank you for joining us on Africa Update, really, and sharing. Unfortunately, we have to go at this point.
I appreciate it. Well, thank you so much.
All right. All right, you're watching Africa Update on Trust TV. After the break, International Conservation Group rescues 2,000 South African rhinos. Join us again for more. Welcome back. You're watching Africa Update on Trust TV. Now, an international conservation group has come to the rescue of the world's largest private rhino breeding operation after the owner in South Africa said he didn't have the funds to sustain his farm. Kate Bartlett spoke to experts about plans to eventually relocate the 2,000 animals and release them into the wild.
These baby rhinos are some of about 2,000 rhinoceros that are now at a secret location in South Africa's northwest province, preparing for their release into the wild. The rhinos were bought by the conservation group African Parks from a private owner who could no longer afford to keep them.
There's a bit of a conservation and a moral obligation for these rhino that African Parks definitely feels that they had to step into the space. Obviously, with African Parks' history and their sort of ability to manage protected areas well, currently 22 protected areas in 12 different countries in Africa or throughout Africa, And with the expertise that African Parks has in sort of rewilding these areas and translocating animals, it was pretty much a good fit.
The animals on this farm, which used to belong to John Hume, a multimillionaire who set up a rhino breeding project, account for about 15% of the world's southern white rhino population. Southern white rhino, found in South Africa and neighboring countries, have been heavily poached for their horn and are classified as near threatened. But poaching of the species has seen a welcome decline recently, with 231 killed in the first 6 months of this year, an 11% drop compared to the same period last year.
Where we have success, we attribute that to not just the boots on the ground, but also to the integrated manner in which we are working with the police, with the Justice Department and the Prosecution Department, but also the collaboration that is going on between state-protected areas and private protected areas where we are sharing intelligence and information.
Creasy says this integrated approach has led to some major busts.
Not only are we intercepting those who are involved in the actual killing of the rhino, but we are also intercepting those who are involved higher up in the value chain, in the processing and export of the derivatives.
African Parks, whose president is Britain's Prince Harry, has a tough task ahead of it when it comes to finding suitable areas to release the 2,000 rhinos over the next decade, according to Michael Knight of the International Union for Conservation of Nature.
Look, I think it's a great opportunity that African Parks, to all their credit, have taken it on. It's a tough move, and I'll tell you why, because trying to make sure that you've got enough suitable and large areas to take these rhinos is also a tough ask. A lot of people and organizations are weary to take on rhinos because of the liability that comes with them.
Despite those challenges, this rhino population is one step closer to getting the new homes they need.
And with that, we wrap up Africa Update for this week. In case you've missed, you can always catch up across all our social media platforms and also on our YouTube live.